Hey guys, Filani here, how are ya? Today we're gonna continue on the material series and we're gonna talk about material functions. Material functions are very useful for when you need to repeat functionality among several materials or even in the same material. They are also useful to do effects like this when you mix more than one material in a same surface. And let's get to it. The first thing is, how do you create a material function? I have a folder here just for it in this project. You right click and go to materials and textures, material function. I'll name it MF for material function underscore tutorial function. That's how you create a material function. I double clicked it to edit it. A material function is much like a standard blueprint function. It has inputs, it does some calculations, and it has an output, or more than one. So how do I create inputs? Right click, input. In the function input, you can configure its name, for example, color. Its type. You can input a description if you want. I'll do a description just to show you later how you can see this. The main color. The input type. It can be a scalar, vector 2, vector 4, texture, cube, texture 2D, texture cube, a bool, or material attributes. We'll talk about material attributes later, and they're awesome. Whoops, I deselected node. Here you can set a default preview value. You won't use the default preview value unless you turn this on. Use preview value as default. If you don't check this option, you'll be required to use this input when you use this function. So I prefer to always have a default for my parameters. And the sort priority is like I have a color. I'll duplicate this with Ctrl W. I have a roughness. And this roughness is a scalar, and I want the roughness to come before the color. By default, the parameters are organized in alphabetical order. But if I want the roughness to come before the color, I can leave roughness as sort priority 0 and color as 1. So now color will come after roughness. You know what? Instead of roughness, I'll call this brightness. And I'm gonna take the color and multiply it by the brightness. And this will be the result of my function. As you can see, if I select the output, I have a name. I'll call this new color. I can put a description, priority, because I can have more than one output by right clicking and typing output, function output, delete function outputs. So as you can see, the output doesn't have a type parameter, a type option. It means that Unreal will automatically figure out which kind of parameter this is, depending on what you're plugging here. So in this case, I'm multiplying vector 3 by a scalar, so the result will be a vector 3. And Unreal knows this. So I'll save my function. It automatically applied the changes I made to it. And now I'm gonna create a material to use the function inside it. So material, my shaders folder, right click, material, M underscore material functions touch. To use your function, you hold F and click, or right click and type function, material function call. When you create this node, it doesn't have your function. You have to select from a list of functions. So here I'll call tutorial. Tutorial. Here it is. math tutorial function. So here are my parameters, my inputs, and my output. Also, if I had my function selected here and created this node again, the function is automatically selected for me. So let's test what we have done. I'll create a vector, actually a vector parameter, and call it color. Whoops, color. And a scalar parameter for brightness. And plug it in my base color. Now if I take my color, set it to something, set it to red, my final color will be black, because I'm multiplying the color by 0. So I'm gonna multiply it by, let's see, 2. And let's make another color, because it's really hard to see the effect on this one. So now you see I have a yellow, and the yellow is much brighter because I'm multiplying it by 2. If I multiply it by some absurd value, like 30, the material will start to glow. 100. It should be glowing. Interesting. Very interesting. So guys, it was not glowing because I was using the base color. And before, if I'm not mistaken, when you input a very bright color in the base color, Unreal would make the material glow, but now it has to be in the emissive color, and it makes sense. So now it is glowing because I'm multiplying a color by a very high value, so it's like that color really strong. I'm gonna put it back to 1. So as you can see, our function is working. I'll unplug this from emissive. If I take my color and multiply it by 0.5, it'll be half the intensity of the original color. And that's basically what functions do. You can output things, and Unreal has many functions for you to learn from them. Like the blur sample offsets. This one is a really great example of why you should use functions for really complex math. Imagine if I want to use this like twice. I want to do this math twice. Look, what is this math? You can double click on real functions to see how they're made. Look at this. Imagine this in your material like 3 or 4 times. Too much space. And if you make some error here or here, and you've already duplicated it several times, you have to correct the error in all of them. So functions are very useful because you do it once, you correct it once, and everywhere you're using them, the bug or whatever gets corrected. So this is one usability for functions. Now I'm gonna show you another. Have you ever made a material in Unreal? Like not just an effect, like some texture treatment. Let's do something here. I have my color. I'll put this in the base color. I'll make this a little bit darker. Okay, that's fine. Now I'm gonna create an effect of a rim light in the material. So it will always look like there's a light behind the object. I'll use Fresnel for this. Remember on the first video about materials, I explained Fresnel effect. It's when the more the faces are perpendicular to the camera, the more reflective they get. This angle of the face to the camera is what made the Fresnel effect. The more to the border you are, the more Fresnel effect you have. So if I reveal the color of this node, you can see it's wider on the borders. So it's outputting for me a value from 0 to 1, from the faces towards the camera to the faces away from the camera. Let me show you in the plane, for example. The more I rotate the plane away from the camera, the more white it gets. That's the Fresnel effect. So I'm gonna use it to simulate the rim light. I'm gonna stop reviewing this. I'll make a light color. It'll be blue, light blue. And then I'll multiply my color by the Fresnel effect, so the color can't be seen in the material center, and plug it in the emissive color, so even if it's dark, it looks like there's a color behind the material. If you hold L and click here, you can see you can move the color in the material preview. So now you can see, even if my color is behind my material, I can see the rim light. You can make it more intense in the borders and less intense in the center by changing the exponent. So the higher the exponent, the less intense in the center and more intense in the borders. See? I want more, like 30, let's see. Oh no, too much. Then okay, that's cool. I like that. Okay, so I made this effect for my material. Imagine like this is really complex. Like it took you all day to figure it out, to create a very cool effect and figure the right values. If you create a material instance, let me apply this and save. Okay, if you create a material instance from this material, create material instance, I'll call this mi for material instance and leave the rest. Materials, move here, right? If I added the instance, I can change the parameters I created there, the color, like color, and I have some other parameters that Unreal let me change in the material. For example, here in material property overrides, I can change for masked materials the mask clip value. I can change the blend mode, opaque, mask, translucent. I can change the shading model, if it is two-sided or not, and jitter. But what if I want to use this effect plus some more? Well, I could easily copy these and paste into a new material and add the other effects. But come on, if something's wrong here and then I want to change, I have to change it in both materials, or even more if I have created more. So what can I do? I can create a function that outputs the material. Yes, the complete material with roughness, metallic, etc. Everything. So how can we do this? I'll change my function here, because honestly this does almost nothing. So I'll create, yes, I want to delete the inputs. I'll create a vector parameter here. If you create parameters inside functions, they will appear in your material like they were created inside the material itself. So I'll create here base color. Actually, you know what? I can copy those inside the function. Control C, emissive and base color. Okay, Control V. I'll create a material attributes node. Make material attributes. This is very similar to the material output node you see in the material, and it has all the possible inputs from the material shading models like cloth inputs, clear coat inputs, everything. So I'm gonna use the basic ones here, emissive color and base color, and I'll output the result of these material attributes to my new color that I will name rim light material. Alright, So I'll save this function. Unreal compiles it for me if I save. And inside my material, I'll delete these. I can use my function material tutorials. Now, how do I use this? Because I have base color, etc. Not just one input for everything. Well, you can use this by selecting your material node or nothing and checking this. Use material attributes. Now your material will be created by material attributes that can come out of functions or made here. You could also use this, break material attributes, and plug each attributes in your material attribute. But come on, that's very time wasting. So now, I create a material from a function. This is a very simple use case. But like I said before, what if I want to change something, add something to this material without having to modify the original one? Now I can. Unreal has a node since 4.13, I believe, where you can set individual attributes that come from this function output. SetMaterialAttributes. You select the node, and here you can select what attributes you want to show. So I want to add a normal to this material. So I'll put the result of the altered material to my final material, and I'll add normal texture to this normal here. Create a texture. Let's get some normal. Is there something with normal in the name? No. This is cool. So now I have my rim light material, untouched, but modified inside of this material, working flawlessly. It's just like I have done everything right here. And I could change this, or what I'm altering here. I could alter more stuff, like the roughness. So I could make the material very shiny, for example. And my original material is still untouched. So that's one cool use of the material functions. You can output complete materials from them. For the last part in this tutorial, I'll show you how to use 2 or more materials in one material like I made here. So one of the materials we already created, the yellow with rim light 1. Now let's create another. Remember, to blend the materials, you must use material functions. mf underscore, I'll call this rust. I'll just alter this material here real quick to make it metallic. So I want to have an effect like I have a metal and I have rust on the metal. Okay. Now let it the rust. Save here. So for my rust, I want to have some noise texture. Let's see if Unreal has something. Noise. Good, noise, high frequency. Oh, this is interesting. I'll use this. Remember, if you want to see the engine content, you come here in View Options and activate this Show Engine Content. Most of these I have because of the starter content, but it seems this one is from the engine itself, so any project you create will have this texture. Okay, so I have a noise texture. I'll multiply it by some color to create the rust effect. Rust color. I won't make this very elaborate because it's not the focus of the tutorial. If you want to skip this part, I completely understand you. I'll leave links with the topics of the video and their times in the video description. Okay, remember I want to create a material, so make material attributes. This is my base color. I want to change its UVs, make some tiling. If you want to know more about tiling and offset textures, you can watch the last tutorial I made on textures. Okay, I think this is a very cool rust material. Actually, let me tile this a little less. Okay, it's interesting. I use the same texture on the roughness. Since it's a grayscale texture, all the channels are the same, so I can use each one of them to create the roughness. Okay, I'll add to the roughness so it's more rough. 0.5 maybe. Okay, so it's very rough. I'll create a normal from this noise. Normal from height map. So this is, I have to use a texture object for this. So texture object, that same texture, noise. I use this as the texture for this texture sample, so we keep everything synced. This is my height map, and my resulting normal will be based on the noise texture. Alright. And I need to change its UVs, I believe it's here in coordinates. Okay, so now it's a very rusty look. Just maybe darker, much darker. Alright, that's cool. Okay, I think my rust is good, so I'll save this. Unreal compiles it for me. Let's go back to my material. Let's use this function. I'll delete this texture, it was only for demonstration. I'll hold F and click. Now how do I blend these together? Unreal has a node just for this. So blend material attributes. You plug one material in A, one material in B. Remember in the texture tutorial when I talked about the lerp node? It's the same thing, only with materials instead of floats. The alpha will work the same. If it's a black color, it will show the material in A, and if it's a white color, it will show the material in B. I'll use a texture to control this here. The texture you can download. I'll leave the link in the video description. Okay, texture. It's tutorials. Tutorial. Texture. Textures tutorial. And I'll use, I believe it's my red channel that has a very interesting pattern. Now as you can see, we have a very rusty material. Let me invert this. I think it's too much rust for too little metal. Okay, that's better. See, now I'm mixing two materials. And if I had one of them animated, like if I had the rust with moving noise, it would work here. Just like I made in this material. Everything moves and everything works. You can also, since this is a texture, you can use panner on this to animate the rust position. So I need time and the speed. It could be a flow too, but let's Let's be simple. Let me turn here real time. You see? Now I have my rust animated. You know what's even cooler? I could control this to make my material be a dynamic rusting material. So I could control from blueprints how rusty it is. I'll take this output here and I'll power it by some scalar value that I could later control in blueprints. Rust amount. The default for power is 2. I'll leave it at 2 and plug it into my alpha. Okay, now I can control my rust amount, but just by changing a simple value. If I input here like 20, I have a lot of rust, and 0, I have no rust at all. And that's because when you power some grayscale texture, the more you power it, everything below white will get darker. And if you input values less than 1, everything gets brighter. So 0 makes my alpha white, which is the pure metal function, metal material, and values greater than 1 or even 1 will start to show the rust. So now I can apply my material to my cube. So that's it, guys. That's how you mix materials in Unreal. You know, you could get crazy and make another one of these, mix even more materials, inputting like these results inside another one of this with more alphas. But remember, the more you do this, the more complex your material gets, the more heavy your material gets. So be careful. If you really want to do this, use less textures, use simpler calculations, optimization, guys. Always remember about optimization. After all, we're making games, not renderings. So everything has to work in real time and fast. Oh, and since we had a material instance of our material, we can see the rust changes in real time, which is really cool. So I can make my material really rusty or ever less rusty. Oh, and by the way, do you guys remember when in the first video about materials we talked how metals are supposed to be 0 or 1? You can see Unreal is taking this into consideration. I left my rust material as 0 metallic. So when mixing, even though my rust is really weak here, you barely can see the orange color, it is non-metallic where it has rust until I insert 0 here, so it has no rust at all. So what Unreal is doing is, for example, 0.001. What Unreal is doing is, here is better to see it. It's taking into consideration that either the material is metal, like most of the cube, or it isn't. Okay? So remember that. Sometimes you get very weird effects, and they can be because of this. A metal mixed with non-metal. That's it for today, guys. I hope you learned a lot from this video. If you liked it, click like and subscribe. Also, tell your friends about it, because the more people watch my videos, the more I can dedicate my time for doing tutorials. And remember, this is a series on materials that will be getting more and more advanced, so it's really worth subscribing now. If you want to learn something specific, leave a comment and I'll do a video on it. Thanks for watching, until the next video. Material functions are very useful for when you need to... it's much like a standard blueprint function. It's much like a standard...